Today is Wednesday, April 23rd, 2025. This is Quick Start from CBN News. I'm Dan Andros. Is there revival surging across America? We'll have that top story and more on today's podcast, where we're bringing you news from a Christian perspective. Don't forget to subscribe. You can leave a rating on your favorite podcast platform of choice. And you can email us as well, quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. Joining me today, CBN's Trey Phillips. A lot to get to, as always, on this podcast. On the focus story, there are some big-time rumors swirling around and reports swirling around Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth.
Yeah, so it was a bit of a chore to get him into the seat as defense secretary, and now there are, like you said, rumors swirling. But the White House is saying one thing, and the rumors are saying something else. So we'll get into those details.
All right, looking forward to the details there on the focus story. On the main thing, a wave of deadly violence sweeping through central Nigeria, as we talked about yesterday. It's targeting Christians. The mainstream media largely ignoring this story. We are going to stay on it for now, with another report on that coming up on The Main Thing. Make sure you subscribe to all of our CBN News podcasts, including our newest podcast hosted by CBN's Abigail Robertson, Heaven Meets Earth, looking at some pretty crazy and cool, miraculous stories. You'll want to check that out for sure. The link is in the description of this podcast episode. And with that, we are going to head to the news in 90 seconds. American missionary who was rescued after being kidnapped in South Africa is speaking out. Josh Sullivan, a U.S. missionary and father of 6, was abducted at gunpoint during a church service in South Africa. They knew him by name, stormed the church, and took him in front of his family. After 5 days of captivity, he was rescued unharmed in a deadly shootout with South African police. 3 of the suspects were killed. Sullivan was found in the vehicle during the raid on Easter weekend. Sullivan credited God and global prayer for his survival. He said, because of these prayers, God performed a miracle. Sullivan and his family are now safely back in the United States, asking for privacy as they heal. And we're coming off Easter weekend here, and in 2025, a lot of churches nationwide saw and reported on having record attendance, record numbers of baptisms. Many say it's more than the typical Easter bump. Preston Wood's Jack Graham called it the cusp of spiritual awakening, especially among young men, which is interesting. Harvest Greg Laurie saw over 500 people come to Christ at Easter services. Other churches as well. You can read more about that. We've got a report on it on cbnnews.com. Make sure you're checking that out. And that is something that's been consistent. We've seen this, Trey. I mean, in the midst of all the chaos going on, we're still seeing reports of this. In that report that I just mentioned, there's small towns like in Kentucky, that Falmouth, Kentucky only has 2,000 people, and they saw 700 people attend Easter services. So, you know, and I think you made this distinction in a previous podcast episode, Trey, about revival, just pointing out it's not necessarily just all new people coming in. It's when Christians, you know, are revived, like a revival, right? They're getting energized about the faith, and God is doing something in that. So great to see it.
We actually just talked to Evangelist Matt Brown. We were really focused on the Easter worship service that was American Idol on Sunday, but we also touched on just this spirit of revival and the spiritual awakening that's happening across the country. And I asked him, like, it's interesting to see this awakening and this new interest in faith. At the same time, our culture has never been more hostile toward our faith. And he just reminded us that, you know, that's not uncommon. That's what the Bible is full of. He said, you see hostility toward Christianity. You see the disciples facing violent and often deadly persecution. And still, the church was flourishing. More and more people were coming to Christ. He said the kingdom of God operates that way. Often those two things happen at the same time. They're not polar opposites in God's kingdom.
Yeah, absolutely. And something we need to all be praying for, not only just around the country, but in our own lives as well, right? I mean, there's always more engagement we can have. There's always more excitement we can have about the faith and more urgency we can have about the faith. So, you know, we may as well be praying for all of us, starting in our own neck of the woods to have a revival of our own hearts. So, all right, we're going to head over to the focus story now. As we mentioned at the top, there's lots of reporting going on around on Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who was kind of already on hot water for the Signal Gate, as it was dubbed. And now there was potentially another one. So tell me about what's going on here.
Yeah, so this is something that's been brewing now for a while, but Hexath is under renewed scrutiny for allegedly sharing classified military details about U.S. airstrikes, specifically in Yemen, via a private Signal group chat. Obviously, that is not under the purview of the government. It doesn't meet the strict scrutiny of security protocol for the federal government. So in this Signal group chat was Hexath's wife, his brother, and his attorney. Now, of course, this is all alleged at this point. These are just what the reports are saying. And this, as you said, Dan, it follows a prior incident where he inadvertently included a journalist in yet another separate Signal group chat with senior officials, which, of course, at that time and now again raised concerns about, just the security of the whole apparatus there at the DoD.
And how has the White House responded to this latest round of criticisms?
So there's been mixed reporting on that. NPR had a report out yesterday saying that the White House is kind of beginning the process of looking around for other options. However, that is not really what the White House is saying, at least publicly. President Donald Trump has expressed his very strong and staunch support of Hexath. He dismissed the concerns over the Signal chats then and now as, quote, a waste of time. And he said that the defense secretary is doing, quote, a great job in his position as Secretary of Defense there as the head of the DoD. So mixed signals there from the White House. But if you're looking not at the reports and just what the president is saying himself, he doesn't seem to be concerned about it, and he does not seem interested in removing Hexath. But again, there are those unnamed reports from the White House saying they're scrambling a bit to find who could be an alternative.
Yeah, and I mean, look, you always got to take some reporting with a grain of salt until it's confirmed, just for a whole host of reasons. But one, we know, by and large, the mainstream media generally hostile to the administration here. So you got to take a wait and see approach here, because, there may be actual legitimate concerns and possible ramifications from what's being alleged here. And what are some of those concerns and ramifications?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. You do have to take it with a grain of salt, because anytime the mainstream media can get a shot in at President Donald Trump, they're going to do that, right? This is an opportunity to swipe at Trump, and they're not going to miss that opportunity. But there are several critics, including a few in Congress, who have raised some serious concerns about national security, obviously noting that this is sensitive information. It's going out in unsecured channels, allegedly, and that could, of course, put our U.S. military personnel, operations, and others within that apparatus in some degree of danger, depending on, of course, the information that is potentially leaked in these alleged group chats. And the incident has, of course, prompted some discussions about a potential replacement to Hexath, though no official names have been mentioned, given, of course, the White House, President Trump are at this point completely dedicated to Hexath. But, that doesn't stop reporters and people who are trying to just read the tea leaves from saying, oh, I wonder who could replace Hexath if that were to happen.
Yeah. And I mean, look, I think we're at that stage in this reporting to resist sort of whatever narrative initially emerges. This is something I think this is a good posture to take. And we've talked about it, Trey. I know you and I have, but worth reiterating. Resist the narrative and the playing field they want you to play on. What they want you to say is, because remember, this is what Democrats sort of said at the beginning, that, oh, he's never run a large organization and he's incompetent and yada, yada. Now, at the end of the day, wait till you review all the facts. Maybe that's true. Who knows? But I think you have to take that initial response and say, okay, I think the question to ask is this: what do they want me to be talking about? How do they want me to react when someone leaks these sort of stories and pushes this sort of headline? When you see that headline repeated over and over on different mainstream media websites, you have to go, okay, this is what they want me to settle into. Let me sift through all of this and look at the actual facts that they have. Don't look at the comment that some senator or some congressman or congresswoman says about it, look at the facts that are actually there. I mean, listen, I'm giving this speech to remind myself, because it's very easy to just sort of soak in the headlines and sort of just read them and then kind of land in that spot. But that's the playing field they want you to play on. You have to kind of pull yourself out, get above that, and say, okay, I can see these people injecting all these things into the playing field, this narrative, this headline, this buzzword, that buzzword, and say, let me just sift through that, pull all those things out, and then just look, here's the fact, here's the fact, here's the fact. So I think good reminder for us all.
Yeah, totally. I also think that it's worth, just as a mental exercise, kind of remembering how the media acts when a Democrat is in office, right? When Joe Biden is in office, and it's at that point becomes state-run media. Actually, what they're doing right now, challenging the guy in power, President Trump, challenging the White House, asking questions. That's actually what they're supposed to do, right? They're doing a good job. But they don't do it for both, yeah. But the frustration for conservatives, at least, comes when, well, Joe Biden released a statement saying he's not considering replacing as Secretary of Defense, so why are we even talking about it? And that, to me, is that juxtaposition of the two ways that we treat a president based on the letter behind his name is what causes such consternation.
Right. I mean, the Hunter Biden laptop story is a perfect example of this.
No curiosity there at all.
They wouldn't even report on it. No, this is verified there. And then lo and behold, it all turns out to be true if they actually just push and ask some questions. And the one time, Trey, that we saw this trend that you're talking about as far as partisanship bucked was after the disastrous Biden-Trump debate, when Biden was very clearly not well and embarrassed himself essentially out there on the debate stage. Well, then the media that are largely left-leaning panicked, because it was almost a shoo-in at that point that Trump would win the election if it were against Biden. And so all of a sudden, you just saw the media leap and ask all these questions. And it's like, oh, this is what it's like with the media. You could almost sense it. You really could. Like, this is what it's like when the media is not just soaking in whatever narrative line the administration gives them and then pump it back out. Like you said, state-run media. And so it's, the difference is very, very stark. But again, we have to, it's really incumbent on us to sift through all of those shenanigans and make sure we're sticking to the fact. And listen, hold both administrations accountable. If they're full of malarkey on something, call them on it, because it doesn't help anyone to be a spinster for one side or the other. All that does is allow them to do things that maybe aren't, fully true or fully on the up and up. So nobody wants that at the end of the day. So any final thoughts on this one, Trey?
Yeah, the last one I'll say is, obviously we'll keep following this Hexath story and we'll see what happens, but I do want to mention that the one thing that Hexath at this point has said himself is that he has no intention of stepping down, and that President Trump in closed-door meetings has encouraged him to, quote, keep going. So that's the word from Hexath and from the White House. We'll see what ends up being true as the weeks progress. Yeah, definitely. All right, appreciate that. I mean, it would be quite something for him to have to, redo that whole thing, because, we all know the midterm, how history goes. If President Trump wants a lot of his things enacted and everything, like, they've kind of got to do it now. They can't be wasting time on getting more people confirmed. They've already kind of gone through that process. So I appreciate that story today, Trey. We're going to head over to the main thing now. And according to Truth Nigeria, more than 100 Christian men, women, and children have been brutally killed in just the past 2 weeks. Well, CBN's Raj Nair spoke with Douglas Burton, managing editor of TruthNigeria.com, to shed light on this escalating crisis and why so little really is being done to stop it. That conversation is today's main thing.
According to Truth Nigeria, over 100 Christian men, women, and children have been slaughtered in the last 2 weeks in central Nigeria. Well, managing editor of TruthNigeria.com, Douglas Burton, joins us now. So, Doug, for most folks, this is a brand new subject, and for even those who maybe have heard of it, there's a little bit of uncertainty as to exactly what is happening. So, as someone who's dedicated their life to this, can you paint the most accurate picture for us? What is happening to Christians in Nigeria?
Thanks, Raj. I will try. when I started reporting on Nigeria 6 years ago, it was extremely mysterious and hard to comprehend. It seems very complicated, but you can understand it if you realize that in many countries of Africa, there's a thing called Islamization, whereby Islamist radicals are trying to expand their control of territory and at the expense of non-Muslim people. And that's what's happening in Nigeria. There has been a continual push and extortion and coercion of Christians in Nigeria, especially in the so-called Middle Belt. There's been a push to force these people to get out, and their land is being taken over by criminals who are either insurgents like Boko Haram, or they are bandit terrorists who are also radicalized Muslims. And the end result is what we call Islamization.
So when it comes to, the atrocities and the slaughtering that we hear on a daily basis, is it accurate? Is that actually happening in Nigeria?
It's unbelievably tragic, but yes, it's happening on a regular basis. And we don't see it in the United States because our Western media can't really get it. They think it's very far away. Ironically, the challenges that Nigerian people have are actually very similar to the challenges of American people. They're trying to make sense of their own government. They feel deceived by their own government and their own fake news media. Those are the challenges that Nigerians have as well. But they are living they're in a vortex of violence, especially those in the Middle Belt. And that includes the reporters who give me their information. These are the reporters in Plateau State where there were horrendous, atrocious, heartbreaking massacres just before Palm Sunday.
Will you actually send us a clip from your organization, Truth Nigeria? Let's play it right now.
And thousands of Christians have fled their homes following a wave of terror attacks in Plateau State, Nigeria, triggering urgent calls for U.S. intervention. President Bola Tinubu has condemned the violence in Bokos County and vowed to bring the attackers to justice. But days later, more than 1,000 survivors remain displaced, living in fear as the threats continue. Master Akeem now reports.
As of April the 7th, more than 50 people have been killed in just 10 days across farming villages south of Jos, the state capital, according to tribal leaders. Governor Caleb Mutfwang has described the attacks as genocidal and called for self-defense amid accusations of military inaction. On April the 2nd alone, more than 40 people lost their lives during terror raids on 5 villages located 50 to 60 miles south of Jos.
We had gunshot everywhere in this community. Then destroy our community, 4 communities, and destroy our houses, collecting all the goods that are inside the commodity that are inside the houses, then destroy it.
The attacks concentrated in the western part of Bokos have forced thousands to flee to safer areas.
Those that run to Shah or Mangunanya, close to our community, or Doho, they can reach at least 1,000 people.
Truth Nigeria witnessed hundreds of escapees jumping into trucks and being evacuated by soldiers. The violence erupted the morning of April the 2nd in an area called Mangor and quickly spread to 5 neighboring villages by day's end.
We're still going on for assessment. People are in the hospital, and I think that is what I can say for now.
The latest attacks have heightened concerns for the safety of Christian residents and caused town leaders to call for U.S. intervention. In Jos, Masara Kim, Truth Nigeria TV.
Doug, it seems like this is starting to happen now every week, and us at home, we feel utterly powerless. So what can we do about this?
Oh, this is a good question, Raj. Actually, there's a lot we can do. I've been a State Department officer in Iraq in a war zone. I was there for 2 years, and I tried to help civil society groups in the United States connect with the same parallel civil society groups in Iraq at that time, and it was very promising. People in the United States can help by praying for Nigerian churches that are under attack or that are under threat, but also they can pray with the Christians in Nigeria. You can pray by cell phone. You can use the social media calls. It doesn't cost anything. And the other thing they can do is they can help these grassroots journalists who are actually in danger themselves. They're in the so-called killing zones. You can help them get their story out in your local area. In fact, contact me after the show, and you can reach me at burtonnewsandviews@gmail.com, and I will help train you to help get the message out about terrorism in Nigeria. It's easier than you might think.
And can you tell me some of the just awful stories that some of your reporters have faced? What
you have in these rural areas, and much of the killings, much of the terrible violence, it happens in hard-to-reach places that are somewhat out of the perimeter of the Nigerian military or the police. And of course, the terrorists know this, so they attack very easy to reach, the unguarded little communities, and they come in the evening or at night, and they just start burning the property, and they shoot their assault weapons at anyone they see, and they go into from house to house, and they kill sleeping villagers right there. Then they chase people into the fields and kill them. Their idea, their purpose is just to terrorize people, to kill as many people, and that means men, women, and children. And that's what happened from April 2nd right up to April 12th and 13th. There was a village in Plateau State called Zike, and in that village, 8 people were killed. I mean, there was about 50 people killed altogether, but 8 of them were the cousins of the new bride of our wonderful Truth Nigeria reporter, Lawrence Sango. So it was a traumatic Palm Sunday for his family. And another reporter, Masara Kim, who's a professional videographer and one of the best war reporters in Nigeria, his cousin was killed also in Plateau State just before Palm Sunday. And that man was trying to defend his village. He was a leader of community guards called in Nigeria vigilantes. And he was targeted because he was an effective leader of the guys who use homemade shotguns to try to defend their villages.
Douglas Burton of TruthNigeria.com. Thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you, Raj. It's always an honor to talk to CBN. If folks would like to know more and how they can help us, come to equippingthepersecuted.org.
Man, just really insane stuff that is happening across Nigeria, especially to our brothers and sisters in Christ there. Definitely keep them on your prayer list, and pray that more people are enlightened to what's going on there, because as Raj and others said, mainstream media just not spending a lot of attention on this particular story. All right, that's going to leave us with time for one last thing on the podcast today. We're going to take a look at Lamentations 3:21 through 23. But this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness.
Yeah, that's a really good reminder. I think, it's easy to get overwhelmed by whatever it is that we're facing today, but to know that God's mercy and grace is sufficient for all of those things is a perfect reminder for today, I think.
Amen. That's where we're going to leave it on this edition of the Quick Start Podcast. Again, make sure you're getting on over to cbnnews.com, faithwire.com for more news from a Christian perspective, just not getting that anywhere else. All right, Lord willing, that creek don't rise up on us. We'll be back tomorrow with more. God bless. See you then.